To the people who record themselves crying and then post it to a social media, why?
Well, I only did it once because I used to have a YouTube channel where I would post videos of my first cockatiel, but one day she passed away and I was just telling the people who would watch my videos why I would not be posting, and then I broke down and started crying.
Misread that as cocktail, and then thought you might have had a few already today before I realized that I'm the idiot. So sorry for your loss. It sucks to lose a friend.
My cousin did this. He was going through depression and had underlying mental issues he never properly addressed as a child. It wasn't for attention, it was his way of screaming for help.
That asterisk is asterisk for attention. Asking for help is asking for attention. It's not inherently bad.
I've done this in the past. It was because I was really sad and alone and wanted someone to comfort me. I didn't have anyone I could personally reach out to. People are like, why would record yourself crying and post it? That's so attention-seeking, but then when someone commits suicide it's, why didn't they tell anyone they were struggling?
This is how I understood it. I had a young family member do exactly this, and all I could think was, why didn't you tell me, or like 5 other people in our family that you know you can completely trust? We are incredibly close, and it was rough knowing she wasn't able to talk to me. I hate that this society has made it that being emotionally vulnerable means you're somehow weak. We're not going to kick you out of our tribe, or kill you to eat you. We aren't cavemen.
I personally don't do it, but a former friend explained to me why. Yes, it is an attention thing. But at least for her, it wasn't in a douchey kind of way. She didn't have the nicest upbringing and was shamed for trying to seek help from her family when it came to emotional hardships. It was a real, toughen up kind of household, which made her wary about seeking out help. Instead, she let the help seek her out by drawing attention to her bad emotional state without actually having to tell somebody, hey, I feel horrible, I need someone to talk to and be there for me. It's actually really sad, and I hate to admit that this is part of the reason she is a former friend. While I felt for her, this behavior took the control away from me. I couldn't tell her that I feel bad myself, and she's crossing a boundary by dumping her emotions on me, since she didn't specifically target me. Sometimes I feel bad for that, but in the end I got to take care of myself too. Edit. Spelling.
Greater than, hey, I feel horrible, I need someone to talk to and be there for me. I was well into adulthood before I realized that most people are part of families where that kind of scripted language is considered good and important. Communicating like that in my family would get you mocked and laughed at until you felt humiliated to the core. Children of narcissistic parents do not get taught how to use words to describe feelings because narcissists don't want to hear it. It was kind of the same in school, TBH, authoritarian adults don't like children voicing their emotional needs. But not teaching children how to ask for what they need doesn't mean they stop having needs. The result is they grow up into adults who only know how to communicate their feelings in the most basic way possible. Physically, through crying, shouting, blushing, laughing, hugging, etc. If you grow up this way, crying is the only way you know how to communicate sadness. Since crying can't be translated to text, then you show the crying in a video. They might think, why is opening up and sharing about how I'm feeling something bad? Everybody is sad sometimes. I'm being real, bringing my whole self to the internet. Edit. As the tone of this comment section shifts more towards empathy for online crying, I feel more comfortable sharing my first-hand account of a time I cried on the internet. The YT video from 2009, link. I had recently moved to Denmark from the US. And had recently come out as a man. We didn't come out as trans back then because nobody knew what that word meant. This was back before the transgender rights movement had any mainstream exposure. Due to one transgender vlogger who documented her transition online, YouTube became a kind of haven for trans people. Despite what headlines might have you believe, we are an extremely tiny minority, and it is hard to find other trans people in real life. Back then it was close to impossible depending on where you lived. I went to the one gay bar in the Danish town where I lived and asked the guy who ran the place if he knew any transsexuals, and he did not. Because of that one brave vlogger, other trans people started documenting their transitions on YouTube too, and a little supportive community grew in what felt like a tiny, quiet corner of the internet. Asterisk. Part Part of documenting transition was also documenting the hate and rejection we went through. This was important for us to know that each of us were not alone in the pain of losing our friends and families. We weren't alone in experiencing the people who were closest to us telling us to go back in the closet and not transition. It also felt important to document transphobia to avoid gaslighting the way people feel a need to document police brutality. The cruelty was real. Our pain was real. I was terrified to come out to my family back in the States. Full-blown, suicide planned in detailed level terrified. Then I saw a YT video of a trans woman where she said she found the courage to come out because she realized that the fear of never getting to be herself was worse than the fear of coming out. I came out knowing that the ICC would still be there if I needed it. Coming out was every bit as hard as I thought it would be. My family was not accepting. Before calling my grandparents, I threw up. I was so nervous. The next day my grandma sent me an email telling me not to transition. The pain was so intense and I was so alone and so unable to handle it. Her rejection meant one fewer person I could turn to on a rapidly dwindling list. The video is of me crying with the text of my grandma's email overlaid. On a positive note, they all did eventually come around years later. Even my grandparents. But I value this video because it's documentation of something really hard that I went through, the vanishing of a support network. People who are annoyed with online criers think they should turn to their support network instead. This video is documentation of how someone's support network can disappear overnight. Thankfully, in my case, that was only temporary. But for several years my family left me to handle the difficulties of transitioning completely on my own. Side story, I became an activist and attended an OECD meeting in Warsaw on hate crimes on the internet. This was the kind of fancy meeting with tablecloths and name placards, where you wore an earpiece and a room of translators would help everyone communicate. I spoke out about how important YouTube was for my tiny minority group and how we didn't post videos there for the sake of being public. We did because we had no other ways of finding each other. We had to put up with the constant trolls and hate because we didn't have any other choice. An American woman approached me afterward. She asked to talk to me more about this. We had a long conversation and in it she introduced me to concepts like flagging, and blocking, and reporting, features YT did not have back then. She was from a very important agency and said they were in talks with YouTube and she wanted to know what I thought of this solution. She asked me if it would be helpful to people like me if we could flag or block hateful comments. I said, yes, please, we'd really appreciate a feature like that.
I guess since everybody else is just going to reply with anecdotes and talk about how much better they are than that, oh bite. I did that once. Why? Like a lot of people suggested, attention. I was 14, I was alone, I was hurting. I wanted someone to tell me I would be okay, and I wasn't getting that IRL. So I went online and recorded myself crying and trying to talk about what was upsetting me. I got a lot of assholes responding, because people seemed so excited to tear down a sad little girl. But I did get kind responses too, and when I felt better I thanked the people who were kind and deleted the video. Sometimes people just need a few nice words, and I don't think they're bad for that.
Mom for a minute is helpful for those moments.
I'm just waiting for someone to answer the question that it was actually towards.
The elephant in the room here seems to be Chris Crocker. I corresponded with Chris briefly when the "leave Britney alone" thing was new. Chris impressed me, an okay person who was caught by surprise. YouTube was new, viral videos of people in meltdown weren't a known phenomenon yet, and Chris was an adolescent. Chris definitely didn't relish all the attention this was getting. Helping to minimize some of that fallout was the reason for our correspondence. Chris hinted at apprehension about receiving threats. That later turned out to have been far worse than I imagined, not just threats but actual assaults. A lot of that was mixed with blatant bigotry against Chris's sexuality. NPR published a recent profile on Chris, link. Chris was a stressed-out teenager who had expected that video to languish in obscurity, then didn't know how to unring that bell once it went viral. If you look past the speaker and the presentation, Chris raises points that later turned out to be vindicated. I'm no fan of pop music, but Spears' father looks like everything people despise about stage parents. Edited to correct typos. Edit number 2. Someone characterized the above comment about not being a fan of Spears as fragile masculinity, which is an interesting take since I'm a woman. Just not a pop music fan. Tastes run more toward vintage jazz, Miles Davis, Cannonball Adderley, Ella Fitzgerald. That said, was able to make Chris Crocker a little bit less of a target back in the day. Obviously that didn't do a whole lot to help, maybe it softened the brunt a little. Here's wishing a similar opportunity had presented itself to make a difference reducing landmines in Laos. I do think hate crime against non-binary people is an issue that deserves more attention and compassion, and also abusive conservatorships. A good friend of my grandmother got forced out of her home and into an institution even though her mind was perfectly sound. She was fluent in 3 languages and had a warm personality, just needed a yard service and someone to help with cleaning a couple of times a week. Her children persuaded a judge differently.
ETA. This was truly years ago, and I am good and quite stable now. Our baby, now 6, ended up having a tongue tie that we got revised and it made a huge difference. Someone reported this for fear of self-harm I guess, so I wanted to clarify. Greater than years ago I posted a raw photo of myself crying to Instagram. I was 2 months postpartum, having a horrible time breastfeeding, and wanted to show other mothers that they were not alone in the raw struggle of motherhood. That every moment is not scripted and that it's okay to be real on social media even when the world seems to value a fake facade.
Even if people are looking for attention doesn't mean they aren't doing it for a reason. My parents beat and neglected me. I was their adopted slave to work their farm and collect the check the state. I was screaming for attention in all sorts of abnormal ways, crying to social media always felt like a last-ditched effort to find someone who actually cares about me for once. Never worked and I learned from it. Some people are growing and I apologize for my ignorance.
When you're feeling down and out, full of worry, full of doubt. When you're filled with deep despairs. When you're sad and no one cares. When you're bleak and broken, blue. I shall tell you what to do. Listen closely. Don't forget. Asterisk put it on the internet, asterisk.
Most people don't make a big spectacle of themselves crying in public, unless they're looking for attention. An asterisk all asterisk of social media is looking for attention, so that goes 1,000 times more there. Obviously there are going to be times when something horrible happens in public which makes you cry on the spot, and of course that's fine. But if you go out of your way to make a scene, out of proportion to the drama, it's a ploy for attention.
Gotta cry in the shower like a real man.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.